Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up for the week of 1 March 2020. Hacker movies, misinformation, and 70% of government employees felt they hadn't received adequate training in cybersecurity. I'm Doug White, your host, and welcome to Security Weekly News wrap-up when we come back.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV courses live and on demand, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Team subscriptions include Pro Portal, so managers have full control over your team's training schedule. Go to itpro.tv/hack-naked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
I'm Doug White. Everybody survived RSA, and we're all back from San Francisco. And so far as we know, nobody's sick in the time of plague. A lot of shows this week, so let's talk about the topics that were covered on all the shows. On Application Security Weekly number 97, Mike, John, and Matt had an interview with Chris Ng from Veracode. Veracode, yeah, sorry. Chris is, I think we had drinks this morning, maybe. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Chris is the Chief Research Officer at Veracode, and the segment was discussing what was going on there. So we can say Veracode one more time. On Business Security Weekly number 163, Matt and Paul had an interview with Rob Gertziev from Psycognito. Boy, it's like the week of company names that I can't say. They were talking about shadow risk, which relates essentially to the security efforts when you need to start mapping and managing attack surfaces. They were also in that same kind of context about how security rating services that people are using may be out of touch with your infrastructure or even may lag behind the way that attackers are actually operating. That's a pretty good topic to look at. You see that all the time, or at least I see that all the time, where companies have built infrastructure and they're trying to review guidelines or best practice, and they're just not even remotely on the same page. And then new equipment comes out all the time. In another segment, they did an interview with Jingang Budge. I don't know how to say Jingang Budge from Forrester Analyst, talking about CISO leadership, culture, and the evolving role of CISOs in the organization. That was actually a good segment, but I've forgotten how to say the name. On Enterprise Security Weekly number 174, lots of interviews from RSA, including Elastic and Rapid7, Plextrack, Gravwell, as well as the pre-recorded enterprise news. All this was wrapping up the Security Weekly RSA experience in San Francisco, which they did last week. So if you didn't get a chance to be at RSA, you might want to check out some of the segments where they were interviewing lots and lots of people out there on the broadcast row in the front of the big auditorium. On Security Weekly News number 15, Jason Wood provided expert commentary on top security concerns and cyber attacks affecting government workers. In particular, he was talking about the results of a survey poll that reported some pretty scary stats in terms of budget and training, including the one about 70% of the workers did not think that they had been adequately trained. I'll talk about that a little more on the news segment. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 19, Jeff, Matt, Scott, and Josh had a lot of compliance news to report, and there were some really good stories on there if you're following that compliance stuff. And finally, on a marathon, Paul's Security Weekly last night, number 641, all the RSA interviews are compiled, so they had all that stuff available, which is on 641. And I know, but sorry, the voice in my head is saying I've got the wrong number. But 641's got all the RSA interviews. 642 was the episode that was actually aired last night live. Paul, Larry, Jeff, Joff, Tyler, and Lee interviewed Sean Metcalf of Trimark. That was the second interview segment, and he was the founder and CTO there. And the topic was about Active Directory and Microsoft Cloud security. They also interviewed Mark Cooper of PKI Solutions, and I really enjoyed that interview segment. The interview was discussing how Shake and Stir and PKI will affect the robocall problem, war dialing and other stuff. They also talked about undersea cables, and there was a whole bunch of interesting things in that conversation. I really did like that segment. I like the other segment too, but I like that segment best. Then in the news segment, they talked about a whole bunch of things, but at the end of the news segment, they were talking about hacker movies, and I have to give my 2 shillings worth at the end of that because I was not on the show, so despite me endlessly typing and screaming at my monitor for them to talk about a couple of other things, they, of course, couldn't hear me. Based on the show this week, my favorite threat was misinformation. Between robocalls and the Mark Cooper interview, maybe you think a lot about how we're so reliant on information, and instant information at that, but we really have very little in the way of validation of any information at all. There were a lot of memes out there about Walter Cronkite. If you are too young to know who Walter Cronkite was, look it up. But how everyone back in the 70s trusted Walter Cronkite on the evening news, and that whatever he said was how it was. And I guess that meme is kind of true, but even then, you really only had their word for it. I mean, Walter Cronkite could have been a horrific liar, biased guy. I don't think he was, but he could have been. And today, between the bots, the robocalls, who knows what's going on, instant information has a lot of potential to be accurate and inaccurate, and we certainly know that's going on. We have to find mechanisms of trust to ensure that we receive valid information when we need it, and that we can trust that it's actually valid. I mean, bias in the news has always been there. I mean, as long as there's been news, when cavemen were chiseling news on rocks, they were probably slanting it one way or the other. But we have to be able to discern completely fake things. And again, that segment was a lot of discussion about PKI and how possibly there are mechanisms to start validating things involved in that PKI process. And yeah, you had to take drinks every time I said PKI, so by now you probably won't remember the rest of the show, but that's okay. And then finally, the news from all the shows for this week. Apparently, boiling your cell phone in essence of Gwyneth Paltrow does little to prevent the spread of coronavirus, but does remove your cell phone's ability to function and gives it an unusual aroma. Likewise, Tito's Vodka, who, while working as an antiseptic in old westerns, apparently does not work in the place of hand sanitizer, but hand sanitizer really doesn't take the place of Tito's Vodka either. Unless maybe you're just trying to stave off those 8 a.m. shakes. Yeah, okay. 42% of IT and security managers say their organizations have been breached as a result of user password compromise. A survey from Enterprise Management Associates Research really had me shaking my head over this continuing to be a problem, but it is a problem. It is fixable. So policy, multi-factor, all these things can fix this horrible nightmare we see with passwords, but it really just keeps going and going and going. And companies are not implementing policy to force people to use strong passwords, to put two-factor or multi-factor in place. And, guess what? People are going to use dumb passwords. They are. I mean, we did a show earlier this year on exactly those numbers. In the same light, research from Pulse Secure found that 92% of UK healthcare organizations responded that unauthorized data access and data leakage had led to security incidents in the last 12 months, and 68% that they had little confidence in their ability to orchestrate dynamic access, authentication, and protection. So 68% of these healthcare providers said they could not manage dynamic access authentication. I mean, really? I'm sure it's a budget thing. I mean, every time you talk to companies about this and you say, why aren't you doing this? The immediate answer is, we don't have the money, we don't have the staff, we don't have the personnel. You're going to have to do something about this, or as you can see, you're going to have 90% of your organizations getting breached. Jason talked about the same subject on Security Weekly News on Tuesday, episode 15. He was citing a Harris poll that was done in conjunction with IBM, which showed that government employees in the U.S. found that 70% of them did not feel they had adequate security training to respond to attacks. And 44% of them said that they had not received any training in cybersecurity at all. So, I mean, that's pretty scary statistics for this week. And, of course, most of us know that those statistics are out there. They're going to continue to be out there, and they're pretty frightening. So let's work on that, because we've been saying that for years. We're preaching to the choir. And I think a couple of those stories end up with That's Why We Drink. This story hit like every show this week. I think because it was so unlikely. You rarely get one of these that has a good outcome. Shark Tank star Barbara Corcoran almost I can't pronounce this stuff. Almost lost nearly $400,000 in a pretty typical email scam. The story popped up all over everything we had this week. It was all over the news. This was essentially the standard email social engineering attack, where you get an email from something that looks almost like the correct address. So it's essentially spear phishing with social engineering aspects that are very effective. Basically, a request for payment on some refurbishments or something, or I don't know what they were doing. To me, it's like, wow, $400,000 for some home repair. But, whatever. I think I said it was like my cigar bill on the show on Tuesday. But basically, the clerk sent over to her that they needed to pay this. They authorized a payment, and the request was sent through. So essentially, they fell for the scam. She approved it. Her assistant processed it, and it went through. When you try to do bathroom upgrades, I guess they add up quick. But the bank processing the transfer of the funds, which was already approved, basically froze the transfer. I don't know if it was because of the amount or because it was suspicious, but they froze it. And before the funds could be moved into a Chinese bank account, they delayed it and they stopped the transfer. So they didn't end up losing the money in the end, which I guess that's a happy social engineering story. Crook, which is a bug that affects encryption. This was on the show last night. Larry was talking about this. Can impact your Wi-Fi connection and break the encryption on devices using Broadcom and Cypress Wi-Fi chips, which is like, all of them. The bug, which Crook is actually a bug. It's not really like an exploit so much as a bug. Basically forces WPA2 to reset the password. And because of that, it can then push your device into a disassociated state. And then you do that all the time. So when you move out of one zone to another, you become disassociated. But normally, there's still not communications going on. If that happens, this allows the interception of traffic that was meant for your device, and that traffic can be decrypted. So it's a very nasty problem. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but if you want to watch the news segment last night, they did talk about this quite a bit. But it is a big problem for all of us. It would literally affect billions, yes, billions of devices. There are patches available for this, and obviously WP3 and other versions, that's the only other version, could prevent this from impacting you. All that is bad, but then also a study that came out this week showed that ultrasound waves, which you can't hear, I don't know if dogs can hear them or not, so maybe you need a dog near, I don't know, maybe if you're in a bar, you should always have a dog that can hear ultrasound. I don't know if dogs can hear whatever. But basically, ultrasound waves can issue commands to our friendly listening devices. So all of our nice little friendly personal assistants, whose names I'm not going to say here because we get in trouble for that, even if they are just transmitting those waves through the solid material like a table or a bar. I think this is a bar I'm sitting at. It's more fitting. They ran two tests, both of which were successful. One tried to retrieve an SMS passcode by carrying on a conversation with our friendly personal assistant on the phone, and they used another test where they tried to actually make an unauthorized phone call. Not only were they able to do that, these attacks requested the virtual assistant with instructions like read my messages, and they actually asked to verify their identity, and they carried on a back and forth conversation using ultrasound waves being sent through the tabletop. They did it with metal, glass, and wooden tables in both directions. So it was a kind of a scary finding, if you're sitting in a bar somewhere and you see a couple of people down at the end of the bar with a bunch of gadgets attached to the bar, you might want to, take notice or, I don't know, do something about it. Tear gas, maybe? The U.S. government is warning that foreign actors are continuing to interfere with the election process, and a multi-agency, and boy was it a multi-agency, warning was issued to the about the Super Tuesday elections and as we go on with election season. The Departments of State, Defense, Justice, Homeland Security, the FBI, NSA, CISA, and Intelligence Directorate all issued a joint warning that everyone was in agreement that foreign actors are continuing to attempt to interfere in the election. But the numerous problems in the Super Tuesday election in California were actually the result of broken machines and difficulty in managing the process. They did not report any hacking or virtualized interference in the process. I think the meddling in this case is more, that they're talking about is in the form of bots and misinformation rather than what we see so many videos on of 10-year-olds hacking election machines at DEF CON. Certainly, I believe that you can hack an election machine, and the election machines are indeed hackable, but that's on an individual basis. All the attacks I saw on the election machines that I've watched were all very, very individualized. But it's difficult to attack all election machines. So this is kind of, an interesting thing. But it does look like good old-fashioned poor management was the culprit in California. A very interesting story for me. Personally, a Maryland court ruled that digital assets damaged during ransomware attacks are indeed covered. This included the costs associated with the recovery, which was a replacement of the computer system, restoration of various things by a cybersecurity firm. So after a ransomware attack, National Ink and Stitch LLC filed a claim with their provider, State Auto Insurance Company. The insurer denied the claim and said nothing was essentially damaged. And this word damage becomes a big deal with insurers because if we say that data was changed, has it been damaged? Well, it's up to the courts to decide. The insurer in this case said no, it was not damaged. The court ruled that there was indeed damage from the encryption attack and all the lost time resulting from that. And this could have a massive impact on the cyber and security insurance industry. I did put links to the actual court case on the wiki, so you can read up. You can either read the article or you can read the entire actual court case in the matter of that kind of stuff. UK Sophos reported a rootkit in the AWS cloud. I found this to be a pretty interesting story, and there was a fairly big discussion about this on Pulse Security Weekly last night. So if you want to check that out, you can listen to all the people on Security Weekly last night in the news segment. We're talking about it. But apparently the attackers went around AWS security groups to piggyback a command and control traffic onto legitimate traffic, which would allow you to bypass a lot of firewalls because that legitimate traffic is coming in, HTTP, that kind of stuff. The attack was billed as a likely nation-state attacker, and that they could probably use this custom rootkit on a large number of servers, regardless of whether they were in the cloud or not, which means the headline is a little bit misleading because it wasn't really a rootkit in the cloud per se. It was really more of a just general rootkit type of attack. The attack was dubbed Cloud Snooper, though. So it did get the word cloud in there because, hey, that's sexy and everything. But it's basically a Trojan, which is used to put a command and control server in the loop, and they allow you to execute another Trojan called Snoopy, which then opens these HTTP and DNS on the compromised system, allowing you to come in over those standard channels. The article and the full report on this are on the wiki, so if you want to read that whole actual report about this, which is probably what you want to read, feel free. And they did talk about this on the news segment on the show last night. And finally, just because last night, I get to have my say, last night they got to talk about hacker movies, which I was very disappointed I was not there for because I do hacker movie trivia at cons and things like that. But basically, the whole time they were having this hacker movie discussion, I was screaming at the screen. And Jeff, man, finally said Brazil, which was one of the movies I really liked in terms of, it's not really a hacker movie. And there was some discussion about, is The Matrix a hacker movie or what is it? And I don't know that Brazil is a hacking movie per se, but the whole movie hinges, spoiler alert, the whole movie hinges on a kind of bug in the system, literally, I won't tell you what it is so you can watch it and see, but a bug in the system that ends up causing all this chaos. So I did like it as a potential. They were talking about the 4th, 5th, and 6th because they had their top 3, which I pretty much agree with. But I was going to add mine. One of the movies the one I was screaming the loudest about was Existence, spelled in a kind of quirky way. This was a David Cronenberg film. David Cronenberg. It was a David Cronenberg film that a lot of people have not seen. If you have not seen Existence, which is about this like totally bizarre biological video game that you plug into your spine. So if you want to see Jennifer Jason Leigh plugging weird, creepy Cronenberg umbilical cords into her spine, now's your chance in fine David Cronenberg fashion. I really like that movie. It really is a virtual reality hacking movie about viruses infecting these biological systems. Really cool film if you missed it. But I did want to give you my hacking movies as I wrapped up here today. My top 3 were hackers, war games, and my number 3 movie I kind of went back and forth on, but I finally decided I'm going to agree with everybody and go with The Matrix, which I do think. I just don't like Swordfish. I'm sorry. I just never really liked that movie very much. But my 4, 5, and 6 then were Existence, the David Cronenberg film, Brazil, and I put as my 6th movie The Italian Job. So that was the 2003 version of The Italian Job, where Seth Green plays the hacker part of the heist crew on that. I really like the old 1969 version of that movie too, with Michael Caine. So watch both of those if you haven't had a chance, but watch Existence if you want to see a really weird Cronenberg movie. And then you'll know why Rick and Morty calls things Cronenbergs as well. And that is the news wrap up for the week of 1 March 2020. I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, and I'll see you next week with more shows and more security news.